This is a dashboard and scorecard concept where somebody has thought of these things, and hopefully they did enough homework and they talked to the business to figure out what it is exactly you want to measure. But inevitably, as you are looking at this data and as you're exploring it, you want to do some of your self exploration on these things. And there was this concept of what's called a decomposition tree that came from Proclarity. And so the way that you access that now is through Performance Point. And what I did was I right-clicked on that Performance Point chart in the background, and I said decomposition tree. And so now what I'm doing is I'm looking at a specific dimension of my data, and I'm looking now at this region that is the West. I can now do my own exploration, go beyond what was given to me from that scorecard and that dashboard, and I can now look at different different ways of looking at my data. And let's say, for example, that I want to look at the devices, the device names for the West, and I can see what takes up the, what is the most common within that whole set of data within device name. And then from there, I can just keep drilling. I can now go over to, let's say I want to look at service from, what did I pick? Mobile 1007, the service name from there. And I can see that, the 80%. Oh, actually, what I can do is I can see all the different numbers from these different dimensions, right? I can see going right up the stack from west to the from the west up to the device name up to the service name. And it's easy to see by looking at the way that it uses these. By the way, this is all Silverlight-based graphics on here. The way that it uses the filler in terms of how much of one dimension member is compared to the others. So it's very easy to visualize that through this sort of graphic, and that's called the decomposition tree. You get that capability when you put these kind of graphs, analytical charts on your dashboard through Performance Point. So that's what an end result looks like. I like this one. I think this one's pretty good. They kept some of those things that we had put in there way back when we first made this dashboard, including the ticker at the top. The tick at the top is somewhat useful. I think that it's a little bit more just kind of a demonstration of what you could do there. I don't know. We used to have this concept when we did these kinds of projects, and we would say that pick your top 5 KPIs, and those would become the KPIs that scroll across the top. Now, the way that you build these then is that you use what's known as the dashboard designer, or the design tool within Performance Point services. And let me just show you how I got here, by the way. I was playing with this earlier, and I didn't want to minimize all that. But when you're in a BI site within SharePoint, you'll have you can have a category where you can collect your different content around your dashboards and your Performance Point data, or your Performance Point content, and that would sit in this case right here. And in fact, what you can do, let me go actually to the home page for my site. Right here, you're able to see that this is a BI Center site, and you can then launch your dashboard builder right from here. So you're able to launch it right from there, and then when you do it, it uses that click once capability, the same way that SharePoint utilizes the report builder within SQL Server reporting services. And then you build out your content. And so what I did was I just made a data connection out to a cube. Now I was not using the enterprise cube, the mech data that you saw there. I was using instead of VentureWorks, just because this is probably what you would have at home. And you can do this test. So I'm assuming here, because I'm going to do some analysis on data for a dashboard, that I'm going to connect into analysis services. So I use for my data source a analysis services database, but you can use their sources like Excel services or SharePoint list or just another SQL Server table, and they're just categorized for you. So you make your connection out to your data source, and then you create the different content in here. And so to make the simplest one that I could, what I do is I started with creating a KPI, and I said that the KPI is going to be based on this value, which is reseller order count, which is a measure within that cube. And then I just used a hard-coded value for what I want the target to be, and I want it to be around 100, which actually I think is low, so I'm going to make that be 1,000. And then you can set down here, you can change how you essentially want the red, yellow, green, the good, bad, not so good values to be within the scorecard. This is for the KPI. And then what you do is you put those KPIs onto a scorecard. And then those KPIs that you create drop into your details pane over here. And then you drop those into your scorecard. And then I build a dashboard from that. So I created the simplest dashboard, which is just one element on it. But you can have dashboards that have all kinds of different, things on it from performance point. Like these are the different reports. You can use different kinds of indicator graphics, as well as a whole slew of different things you can use for that. But when you create your dashboard, then you say that you want to have it, with maybe something like the header with 2 columns. You could have a filter on there, so you can filter your content on there as well. At the end of the day, when you're done building all that, you deploy that to SharePoint. And when it deploys to SharePoint, it shows up in your BI Center here. And so then you get essentially get a fancy new dashboard that you can then view, and you can get all that content out to your users. Now, in my case, I didn't really create much more than just a single KPI and a scorecard. Right? So that's all that mine looks like. Not very fancy, but I just want you to have an idea of how easy it is to build scorecards, KPIs, dashboards using Performance Point. This may be even a tool that you might prefer to give to your power users or your business users in order to allow them to use the power of that tool instead of having to do that from IT. Alright, I'm going to move along a little bit quicker now because I'm a little bit behind time here. So what I want to go into next, and I'll come back to the demo for this too, is Excel services and Power Pivot. And the reason why these are grouped together here in our slide deck is because with Excel, with Power Pivot is really powered, if you will, through Excel, and you really get to it by using the pivot table capability in Excel, and you bring your data into Power Pivot, which is an Excel interface, and then you create your pivot tables, and then you publish those out to SharePoint. Okay, that was a really quick run through how it works, but Excel services is used then to render those sheets within SharePoint, and they don't have to be Power Pivot, of course. They could just be Excel that you then host within your SharePoint sites. Before I go into this, I don't want to go into that yet. What I do want you to know about Power Pivot, though, when I show it to you, is that it's something that you could have users create on their own laptops and desktops and PCs, and they can then share those in SharePoint once you have sort of refined them. What SharePoint will do is it will actually store both the data connections and I shouldn't say both, but the data connections, the data, and the analytics. And it will be able to keep those in formats that can be reused, so you can make more analytical charts in Excel off of those data sources. Very exciting stuff that you can do in Power Pivot. So what else is, by the way, what else is coming that's new in SQL Server 2012 is an update, a V2 essentially, of Power Pivot, as well as the ability to integrate these things much closer into SharePoint. And one of the things I wanted to show here at this point in this presentation is that alerting has moved into SharePoint. It's a little bit of, it is sort of a BI capability. Some of this is capabilities or features that were in SQL Server before that have moved into SharePoint. Like notification services, for example, would be an example of that. Alerting was there in it was in previous tools within Microsoft, and it's moved into SharePoint now in 2012. And then another new feature that I'll demo for you here in a second too is called Power View. And before I show you that, I snuck that slide in there. Before we go to that slide, let me show you what some of this stuff looks like. And then we'll go to the bringing it all together down here. So starting with Power Pivot, and this is available today. And this is with SQL Server 2008 R2 Enterprise Edition. You get this capability, and I'm on my wrong screens. Give me just 1 second. Okay, you know what I'm doing? I'm going to open it up in here because I think I closed that screen. So what I'll do is I'll just show it to you first of all right in Excel. So Excel with the add-in for Power Pivot is free, a free download. You need to have Excel 2010, but you can go to Microsoft.com or you can go to PowerPivot.com and you can download the add-in for it. Let me open up a sheet that already has a Power Pivot already on it, and this is actually getting analytics from Twitter. I'm going to enable that. Okay, that's fine. There we go. So this is a great example because this is actually using data that's out there on Twitter, which is nice, but also uses some of the really nice analytical charting capabilities within Excel. So, and what's nice about this too, that I think is nice about it, is that it also leverages the this filtering capability in Excel 2010, which are called slicers. So I could take, for example, just Bing as a search query, and to be able to filter out on just Bing, I can just click on that right there, and now my query only shows Bing in my charts. And then I could just have those reselected and it'll update all that. That's kind of a really nice capability from an analytical perspective within BI that you get just by using Excel 2010. And you really don't need to build out or know how to build out an analytical chart to do any of this. This is all really just creating pivot tables. And the reason why that is because let me open this up. Over here, if you click on the Power Pivot window, what you'll see is that the data to produce all that is stored within the in-memory analytics. So it does that by bringing data in from multiple sources. It doesn't have to be multiple sources. And then what Power Pivot does is it takes that data and it stores it all within in-memory analytics. So these tabs down here essentially represent tables from data sources. So you pull your data from different databases. It can be SQL Server, Oracle, Access, all kinds of different data sources that you can use. In fact, if I just kind of bring this up here, you'll see just an example of some of them. And you bring those in, and then you one of the key things to do this is that you manage the relationships between those tables. Power Pivot will try to automatically detect those and create the linkages for you and the relationships for you to create the cube. But you can also manage those from here to maintain these relationships. And what else is really nice here on this is the 2012 version, working with data within the tabular format there within those tables. You can also view and manage and manipulate those now ER diagrams. So notice how this is really data modeling and data integration, and it's all from within the scope of Excel. And if you like this capability, what's nice is that this has been extended really quite a bit in SQL Server 2012, so that it now within SQL Server 2012 will allow you to get the same sort of in-memory analytics and the same ER diagram and build in-memory cubes all from within SQL Server Analysis Services now. And then when you publish those out to your SharePoint, so let me step you through this for a second. So here I have this really nice analytical chart that I've created here in Power Pivot. And I've done this by bringing in data from multiple sources here in my Power Pivot. And I have my cube that's essentially been built for me by Power Pivot in memory, so my analytics are really fast and I'm doing just great and I'm loving life. How do I then share this with other people? Well, this is in memory. It is essentially column compression, so it compresses very, very nicely, but still going to be a very large file. I'm not going to be able to just really email this around. So you publish this to SharePoint. This is where SharePoint comes into play. And so what you get within your sites within BI and SharePoint is you get this ability to have Power Pivot galleries. And it uses these Silver Lake controls where you can then sort of, swizzle through all the different spreadsheets and Power Pivots you've created. And then you can bring those up and you can view those as reports. In addition to that, you can schedule the refreshes. So if the data in the back end changes, like in Twitter, that's going to change quite often, right? Very frequently.